Green, and I'm here to give you some perspectives on some things that are happening now in this society and this culture. One of the things that I always talk about is, we're at war. It's a spiritual battle. The Bible tells us we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers, principalities, the spiritual wickedness in high places, the um, rulers of darkness of this present age. And so, what the Bible is very clear to tell us is that we're not. It's not the people that we have to focus on, but not only the spiritual principalities that we're dealing with, but the people that are in position in high places that are carrying out and executing these agendas. And so you have to know who you're battling against and what you're battling against in order for you to actually be successful in the battle, right? So you have to properly diagnose the issue in order for you to cure it. And so I give you an example. If you went to the doctor and you had a headache, you shouldn't just take a pill to stop your headache. You should go and properly diagnose the root cause of that headache. Because if you just take a pill to not have a headache, then the underlying issue that's causing the headache goes unresolved and ultimately could cause, a lot more damage. For instance, if you have high blood pressure and your blood pressure is high and it's causing you to have a headache, then if you just took a pill or a drug or something to make your headache go away and you don't deal with the high blood pressure, ultimately you could have a stroke or a heart attack. So it's important for you to properly diagnose the problem so you can offer the solution that's not just temporary but long-term solution. And so when we talk about the people that are in charge, right? The I'm going to talk about a term that many of you may have heard, and if you have listened to my other videos, you've heard it talked about before. And before you go any further, if you find any benefit to any of my videos or the information here, please subscribe, like, and share it to my channel so this information could get out. They talk about algorithms and all that other stuff. So the more people like it and the more people share the video, the more it will get offered or available for other people to see. So when you talk about the powers that be, and I'm going to talk about who that is, you have to realize how they operate, how they manipulate. They manipulate through words and through symbolism, words and symbolism. And that's why now when people begin to promote same-sex marriage, what they call marriage equality, homosexuality, what they did is they started to throw out a word called homophobic, which means if you disagreed with it on any level, they throw that word out there. And what that word did is it began to shape and to frame people and make people feel uncomfortable to the place where they said we can't talk about it anymore. They do the same thing when they talk about transgenderism. It's a term that they throw out there, and that word is used to control and manipulate the situation so that people will feel a certain way about that particular topic. They control and manipulate you by using words and symbolism. And so another myth I want to dispel, and you hear this word thrown out a lot, especially among Black people, white supremacy. And I'm here to tell you that white supremacy is not the controlling factor in this whole situation. Now, white supremacy is not what's controlled, is not the main issue that we are addressing. Even though we have been taught that white supremacy is the big bad boogeyman and that everyone has to be afraid of anybody of color, especially of white supremacy. And, the CRT people, the critical race theory people will tell you because of white supremacy, you are always going to be a victim. You will never be able to succeed and those type of things. And I'm here to dispel that myth because you have to realize that white, Black, and, those type of racial words are not real. So race is a social construct, doesn't really exist. And so when you think about the ruling elite class, it's not like they consider themselves necessarily white because, of course, white is a social construct. So there's a word I want to share with you. Is a philosophy that I want to share with you called hegemony. Hegemony. And so the powers that be or the ruling elite, they don't look at themselves as we're white and we are trying to overthrow the people of color. It's this idea of hegemony. And let me tell you what the definition of hegemony is: the predominance of one state or social group over others. Predominance, preponderance, leadership, specifically headship or control exercised by one state over another or others as through confederation or conquest. This is a dictionary definition. Number three, leadership, preponderance, influence, or authority. usually applied to the relation of a government or state as to its neighbors or confederates. Now, let me take it a little bit deeper. This concept of hegemony is a concept that the ruling elite hold to, that they believe that they are the ones, the ruling class, that should rule over the rest of humanity, right? So you have these secret societies, you have these people, these bloodline, these families. So when you look at certain families, that's why most certain families are more predominant than other families. You know, there's certain families that you always see people from that family that are in high positions or have a huge amount of wealth. And that's not a coincidence. That's the whole concept of hegemony. And it goes back to the ancient world, that there were certain people, even in England and even in Egypt, even before England and Egypt and the ancient world, you always had this ruling class of people that believed that they had the right to rule over other people. That's this idea of hegemony. So when you think about the ruling class, you're talking about a group of people that are either connected by bloodline, philosophy, or some type of organization that they're a part of. I need you to understand that. I'm going to say that again. When you look at the hegemony or the ruling class, the elite class, the global elite, they look at they're connected by either blood, philosophy, or some type of association through organizations that they're connected with. And so that's how they consider people. So the people that are in certain families that automatically are in positions of leadership or authority or wealth or influence, they have organizations that they also use, and that they will initiate people to come aboard who have the same philosophy or simply who are talented and want to gain wealth and fame and notoriety, right? In the Black community, there's a thing called the boule, and the boule is was started in 1904. But the idea of the boule goes back to ancient Greece and even ancient Egypt, where they would identify certain types of people and they would put them in positions that were basically gatekeepers or doorkeepers that would help to control the rest of the masses. Um, if you understand what the whole idea of the gatekeepers are, like I said, it goes back to ancient Greece. But if you read the book Plato's Republic, Plato talked about these different classes of people, and you have the ruling class, and you have these people that are, he called them basically entertainers. So if you talk about athletes, if you talk about entertainers, singers, or whatever, these are people that are used by the ruling class in order to sway public opinion and influence the masses. So hegemony is this idea of this ruling elite class. And so that's why I say you got to be careful when you just clump everything into white supremacy, because not all white is a very very vague term. Because if you look in Europe, Northern Europe versus Southern Europe, you know, the whole term of white is not something that they go by, right? And if you look at Caucasian versus Anglo-Saxon, so I'm not going to get into that today. If you look at the Aryans, if you look at all this type of these concepts, you have to understand that white people is not just this one solid group that all stand together with each other. You know, you think about in World War II, millions of Europeans were killed by other Europeans. If you think about people that are considered European Jews, they're not considered white. There was I'm not going to talk about it, but I mean in detail, but you know, if you look in even in the Jim Crow South, there were signs that would put Jews in the same categories as black people and dogs, basically. Like they considered all of them were less than human, and they weren't considered white. And so we have to change our mindset to stop thinking about white supremacy as being the big boogeyman, because if you continue to focus on white supremacy, you'll miss the actual philosophy that's behind what is happening. And so if you look at the words like white supremacy, if you look at racism and all these other things, these words, as I said, they only use words and symbols, are used to distract, to manipulate, and to deceive. Now, how do they manipulate with words? It goes back to ancient Europe, not ancient Europe, but it goes back to Europe. There was this thing called German idealism. And the reason I'm going to talk about that, because you'll see German idealism really playing out now. Even there's a video called "What Is a Woman," and I reflect on this Supreme Court Ketanji Jackson Brown, that was I think I said her name right. She had been nominated for the Supreme Court, and when they were going through the interview process through the Senate, they were asking her questions, and they asked her, "What is a woman?" And she wouldn't answer the question. She says, "I'm not a basically," she says, "I'm not a biologist or whatever. I'm not a scientist, and so I cannot answer that question. And so what she was doing, she was demonstrating what's known as German idealism. And again, these things, these ideologies are meant to manipulate, to deceive, and to control the masses, right? So if you can't even define what a woman is, so German idealism is the name of a movement that German philosopher, movement in German philosophy that began in the 1780s and lasted until the 1840s. The most famous representative of this movement are Immanuel Kant. He's one of the main ones. Fichte, Schelling, and Hegel. And Hegel is important, and I'm going to tell you why. While they are important, his name was Friedrich Hegel. George Friedrich Hegel, I think his name is. While they are important, differences between these figures, they are share commitment to idealism. Kant's transcendental idealism was a modest philosophical doctrine about the difference between appearances and things in themselves. So, in a nutshell, what German idealism is, it means that words only have meaning to the one who's using the words. It means I can change the meanings and definitions of words, which is why when they say, "What is a woman?" and you can't answer that, they are trying to give you the idea that words only have meanings based on the ones who are using the words. And I need you to understand that as a society or a civilization, we have to have common meanings and understandings of words and different things like that. Because what happens is that when you take that away, you are actually you're driving down the road to insanity and chaos, right? Because if words only have meanings to what it is that I want it to mean and not the acceptable meaning to the words, then I can control the narrative every day, all day. And that's why I said when they throw out words and different things like that, they use it as control and manipulation. And the reason German idealism, you see it now, because again, even the definition of marriage, we have long accepted for thousands of years throughout humanity in all different civilizations and all different nations that the word marriage meant one, a man and a woman. Right. There were certain times where you could have polygamous marriage, which is a man with multiple wives. But at the end of the day, the relationship was based on a male and a female, which we know in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, that is God's idea for marriage and God's idea for human intimate relationships. But why is Hegel important? Hegel has this, you might have heard me talk about this or heard it before. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. So when you think about these philosophers, that they ultimately were part of this whole philosophy of hegemony, and they believed that not only did they have the right to rule over humanity, but they also had, they wanted to come up with a strategy on how to do it. And so this whole idea is called the Hegelian dialectic, which is, um, it's you start off with the ultimate goal, and then you put a plan in place to achieve that goal, right? So what you might hear people talk about is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or problem, reaction, solution, right? Thesis, antithesis, or synthesis, also known as problem, reaction, solution, which means you have a direction you want to take people into. So what you do is you cause a problem, you anticipate the reaction, and then you are there to offer the solution. Let me give an example. If I wanted to sell water to my neighbors, if I went and set their house on fire, started a fire, my assumption is my neighbors would come and ask me for water, and then I would say, "Oh, by the way, I will sell you this water." Right? Problem, reaction, solution, synthesis. I mean, a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And so, what is happening is the hegemony, the powers that be, want to move society into a certain place. And so, what they are doing is they are offering problems, they are anticipating reactions, and they have an ultimate solution, right? So the ultimate solution in hegemony is that they will rule over the masses. They will rule over the masses. And so the strategies that are being employed are ones to create a problem, right? So they help to create the problem. They anticipate the solution based on in Europe and other places when they study human psychology and groupthink and all these other things. And so they use their resources in order to shift public opinion in a certain way. But their ultimate goal is that they will have power over the masses, right? And one of the things that they'll do is they'll attack religion. They're attacking the basic principles of our society, which is where the nuclear family, um, sexual, you know, how we view sex and sexuality, how we view gender and all those other things. Those things are intentionally being attacked, even race, to have us fighting each other. They are intentionally being put out there and controlled and manipulated, but their ultimate goal is that they will rule over us. And you think about even in the Roman Empire and other cultures, the Roman Empire, Christianity was the biggest challenge to the Roman Empire. So what Constantine did was he came in and he changed Christianity in a way that allowed the state to control the church, which is why our founding fathers and even other places, Germany, England, and other places, the state came in to control the church in order for them for the government to be the ultimate authority and not God. And so that's why our founding fathers, one of the things they did was the First Amendment, right? The First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and freedom of petition, right? So that's why freedom of speech is being attacked, because they understand that this is the First Amendment is one of the foundational tools against the ruling class taking over. And so we talked about the Hegelian dialectic. Let me give you a clear example, and this video is not going to be that long, but I have a couple more I want to go. So another idea is to weaken. Not only you get these kind of terms and phrases, that you get society shifted and the culture shifted in a certain way. It's called cultural Marxism, that they begin to destroy and erode the foundations of our culture. And what it does is it weakens the masses, right? And so here's an example. Let me give you a prime example in the educational system. The educational system, they use certain things and ideologies, and it really hits the urban areas and people of color the most. But yet they are so sophisticated that they get the people of color to approve of their tactics. Where's my notes here? Okay, so here's an article I came across, and this is an example of it. It says many of America's Black youth cannot read or do math, right? And that imperils us. This is an article for a couple of years, the last couple of years. And it says here in this article, 84% of Black students in 8th grade lack the ability to do math, and 85% are functionally illiterate. Right now, this is from these statistics come from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is the NAEP, and it's a sector of the United States Department of Education. So the United States Department of Education, National Assessment of Educational Process, the data says that 84% of Black students lack proficiency in math, 85% of Black students lack proficiency in reading skills, right? So think about this. When you look at it from that perspective, let me give you some more specifics. Let me drill down a little bit deeper. In California, 90% of students cannot do math or read well. In New York, the numbers are 85% and 82%. In Illinois, 86% and 85%. In Texas, the numbers are 84% and 89%. In Maryland, 86% can't do math and 80% can't read at proficiency. South Carolina, 90% and 87%. Georgia, 86% and 82%. Washington, D.C., 85% and 87%. And when you're talking about functionally illiterate or not being able to read and do math, so what happens is the reason I put that article together, because I came across this other article, and it talked about how in Washington State, they because of the pandemic and the COVID shutdowns, that they no longer required students to meet the requirements, state requirements, minimum requirements in order to graduate in math, reading, and other things.